You're listening to The Pain Chaser 1, Ambuscade. This audiobook contains violence, torture, drug use, and scenes of a graphic and often disturbing sexual nature. It should go without saying that it is not intended for children. Now turn up the sound, turn down the lights, and find a comfortable place to hide. Because fear has a face, and I'm going to show it to you. Chapter 12. Anton and David slid silently into the second-floor corridor, looking for any sign of the creature. Seeing none, they made a beeline for the door that led to the roof access. "Did you hear what she said?" Anton asked himself as they walked. "The vessel got him." "She must have been talking about Rob." "Why do you call it the vessel?" David asked. "Because that's what the text calls it." The cop nodded without saying anything. "How is it that you're staying so calm through all this?" "I'm a police officer," David said simply. "We're trained to deal with stress. Tune it out while we do what we need to do." "I can't imagine that they train you exactly for this type of situation," he said more to himself than to David. After a moment he added, "What made you want to be a cop?" Dave gave him an appraising look before he spoke. "I got sick a couple years ago. Makes you really examine your own mortality." "Sick how?" Anton asked. "AIDS," David said, and Anton wished he hadn't asked. A long, awkward moment passed between them. "So that's why you became a cop?" Anton asked. "Because you wanted to save lives? Reduce the amount of pain and suffering in the world?" David let out a single, mirthless chuckle and said, "Yeah, something like that." They threw open the door to the roof and stepped once again into the biting cold. "Watch that door," David said as he went to get supplies from the helicopter. "If anyone comes through, yell." Anton watched for any movement at all, intent that he would not let the creature get the drop on them. He was going to survive this thing. He clutched the book of Adumbral verses against his chest, shivering from the cold. In the end, watching the door had been a miscalculation of judgment, because the attack did not come from that direction at all. It came instead from the very place they had come to search. As David backed out of the helicopter with the promised blanket and first aid kit, he saw the creature rise up, spider-like, from the tail. Annie enfolded Tabby in her arms as best she could with her own injuries, trying to share some of her precious body heat, shushing her like a baby. Tabby shivered violently. Her fear lifted off her as an actual, perceivable smell. It was the smell of blood and sweat. The boys had not returned as quickly as she would have liked, and she was beginning to worry. She told herself it had not been as long as she believed, in an attempt to calm her nerves. It didn't help much. Time simply seemed to drip by, and about her the shadows gathered viciously. "Do you think we're going to live through this?" Tabby asked her, breaking the silence. Annie looked at her. The eyes looked calmer, saner. "Yes, of course," she said reflexively. It was a question she'd been being careful not to ask herself. She was afraid of what her answer would be if she was being honest. "It killed Rob. I know it did. There wasn't anything I could do, but I could hear him pleading with it." Tabby's voice was low and disturbingly monotone. "We were together when it attacked. Like, having sex. He was on top of me when it tore into him." Annie could feel Tabby's fingernails through her shirt, gathering the material into bunches. A sob was seeping back into her voice now. "I could feel him inside of me. I couldn't move, and I could feel his body go limp while he was inside of me." She looked up at Annie, her eyes streaming. "Why is it doing this to us?" she asked. "Why does it hate us so much?" Annie shook her head. "I don't think it does. I don't think it really feels anything at all. I think it just kills because it's supposed to." Tabby nodded and buried her face in Annie's shoulder. 7 people had passed through the school that day. Now 3 of those 7 were dead, and the 4 that remained were not in very good condition, especially Annie. One of her arms was completely useless, and her ankle was badly sprained, possibly fractured. Admittedly, their chances did not look good, but Annie did not want to accept the fact that she may never see Henry again, that she may never get the chance to experience motherhood. "Do you think it got them?" Tabby asked. "No, I don't." Annie was being honest this time. Dave was made of hard stuff, and Anton had turned out to be much more indomitable than she would have given him credit for. She didn't believe it was imprudence. She could see he was afraid, but he had been the only one to think through every move that they made. She felt the rest of them had simply been running from one hiding spot to another, with no real plan on how to escape, trusting in the promise of more police to come rescue them. Her thoughts went back to the claustrum, the strange pyramid artifact wrapped in the sheet. David carried it now. It seemed that one artifact was the heart at the center of all of this horror. Could it really contain the essence of some deranged pain god? The idea was ludicrous, but under the circumstances it seemed the only thing that made sense. Half of the things that they'd experienced that day were impossible, yet they had happened. From above, she heard footsteps on the stairs. 2 sets. David and Anton. They were okay, but they were also coming fast. Running. Being chased? She and Tabby looked up in unison. Anton and Dave were panic-stricken, and the thing was right on top of them. Its bulk came through the upstairs door so forcefully that it literally unhinged it. It thundered after them, taking the upper staircase with 2 leaps. Luckily, the momentum carried it into the far wall with a stunning blow, giving the 2 hunted men a few extra seconds to their lead. Annie grabbed a hold of the axe and stepped in front of Tabby, preparing to defend her from the monster as Anton and David reached them. She knew she could not run. Not anymore. It would catch her without difficulty on her bad foot. She had to make a stand. Live or die. Dave turned and fired, but as before, the creature barely seemed to even notice the bullet. Then it was right in front of her, bearing down at her. She brought the axe up with her good arm and swung at the creature's exposed neck. But the creature was faster. Its forearm caught the axe right under the steel head and wrenched it from her grasp, sending it spinning into the dark. Its weight crashed against her, knocking her from her feet. It should have had her then, but Tabby came miraculously to her rescue. She put herself between the creature and Annie, throwing her chest out and staring up at the creature, a burning hatred in her eyes. "Fuck you," she told it in a voice that was mystifyingly calm and full of force. "You're not killing anyone else." It seemed to have other plans, however. Its enormous claw clamped around Tabby's neck and lifted her into the air. She gasped and choked furiously, trying in vain to tear away the giant hand that was crushing her throat, choking the life from her. Her legs kicked at nothing. Then Annie saw her chance. The iron bar that Tabby had attacked David with lay forgotten at the monster's feet. She snatched it up, and while it was distracted with Tabby, took careful aim at the monster's head. With her good arm, she swung as hard as she could, jumping into the air, ignoring the flare of pain that laced up her leg from her sprained ankle. The bar collided with the side of the monster's head with an almighty whack. For a moment, she didn't think it had any effect at all, and then all at once, the creature dropped Tabby and fell lifeless to the floor. Tabby came to her knees and drew a gasping breath. Anton was at her side instantly, draping the blanket from the helicopter over her shoulders. Annie could see that the white on one eye had gone blood red where a vein had popped, but otherwise she looked okay. The monster lay motionless where it had fallen, and Annie was staring in disbelief at what she had done. "Jesus, Annie," Anton said. "How the fuck?" "It's not dead," Annie said. "It's still breathing." "Get away from it," David warned. "Hold on," she said. She was looking closer at the thing's mask. One finger actually came out and touched where it met the skin of the thing's neck. "Oh my God," she said. "This isn't a mask.